Good evening, all of you. I am very happy to share my thoughts on the topic current trends in water management. Efficient water management. How efficient water management can be done? If the water availability is sufficient and if you are able to meet the demand, if water available is sufficient to meet our demands, our efficient water management job is done. So in order to have a better water availability, we need to augment our water resources. In the past few decades, we have constructed lot of check dams and contour bunds. In these check dams and contour bunds, how can we improve the groundwater recharge? We have constructed so many check dams and contour bunds, and whether they are all performing to their fullest level, definitely it is not so. It is because of one very big reason, that as soon as a check dam is constructed, to start with, initially it will have a very good infiltration capacity. From the first rain onwards, in the upstream of the check dam, you will find that the sediments get collected. For every rain, the sediments would get collected and it will keep on increasing, and the thickness of the sediment will also be increasing, and the groundwater recharge potential and capacity would get tremendously reduced. So in this kind of situations, what scientists have found is, in order to increase the infiltration capacity in the upstream of the check dams, if we are able to dig open a trench, something like this is a check dam. If you are able to construct pits like this, then it will be very useful. These kinds of pits will collect the water, and when water gets poured into these pits, the sediments would get settled down at the bottom of the pits, and the vertical walls will not get sedimented, and through the vertical walls we will be able to have a very, very good infiltration capacity. So same kind of principles can also be used in contour bunds also. If you find here, trenches can be constructed like this, and see here we have a vertical wall here. Through the vertical wall, the sediments would get settled at the bottom, and through the vertical wall we will be able to have a very good infiltration, and groundwater recharge will be better. As days pass by, the pits and the trenches would get the vertical walls would get eroded, and it will become flattened like this. So in these kind of situations, again the infiltration capacity would get reduced. In order to maintain the verticality of the vertical walls, it is better and it is recommended that the pits are filled with locally available gravels and boulders. If you are able to fill with locally available boulders and gravels, then we will be able to maintain the verticality of the vertical walls, and we will be able to get a very, very good groundwater recharge. In certain situations, wherever possible, in the upstream of the check dams, we can fill with gravels like this. So when we are filling with gravels like this, the sedimentation process would occur over a larger area, and the sediments would also settle on the gravels. And since the sedimentation gets distributed, the infiltration capacity of the stream bed will not get reduced very much. You can also see here when the bank of the stream is very steep, and the soil is also highly erodible, in that kind of situations, the geotextiles as seen in the image can be followed. So in that case, soil erosion can be very much reduced, and the sedimentation can be prevented. Now I will talk about specifically to different technologies which are to be recommended in the current situation in micro irrigation. The first technology is drip irrigation with oxygation. Drip irrigation with oxygation means supplying air to the root zone. And next technology is partial root zone drying in drip irrigation. And third technology is low pressure drip irrigation. And fourth is very interestingly, crop demand estimation by cell phone. Our ordinary cell phones can be used to estimate crop demand or crop water requirement by downloading an app from Netafim. And lastly, automation. So we will see one technology by one technology. So in drip irrigation with oxygen, what we do is we supply oxygen to root zone, and that too particularly by using subsurface drip irrigation. Through subsurface drip irrigation, along with the irrigation water, we mix up the air and we send to the root zone, and that process is called oxygation. Because of doing so, what do we get? The crop yield has been found to be significantly increased, and we are able to get earlier harvest, and late season, off-season productions were also made possible. The root mass has been found to be increased, and because of the increased root mass, we get a very good nutrient uptake and the nutrient use efficiency. The microbial activity in the soil gets very much increased, and water use efficiency gets increased, and the salinity tolerance ability of the crop also gets very much increased. So how do we add air or oxygen into the irrigation water? We all know that venturi is the normal accessory that is used for doing fertigation. So that accessory itself can be used for doing oxygation. So when we do oxygation with venturi, what do we do is we just pass the water through the venturi, and we do not dip the inlet pipe into the fertilizer solution. We just keep the inlet pipe like this. It should not be placed over the ground. If it is placed over the ground, when water passes through the venturi, the soil particles will get also sucked in, and it will get joined with the stream. So it should be placed something like this. So when water goes through the venturi, it will take air from the atmosphere, and it will get mixed with the irrigation water, and it will go to the system. Actually, one small problem with this venturi is that the air that gets mixed up with the irrigation water, the size of the bubbles will be larger. So these bubbles would join together, and those air will get released in the air valves. So in order to prevent this, scientists have found now a new accessory to be fitted into the venturi. And if that accessory is fitted, what happens is it produces the micro air bubbles. The bubbles those are produced are very small, and that gets mixed up with the irrigation water, and it moves into the stream, and that micro air bubbles do not get separated away easily from the irrigation water. So this is an advancement, and that is being used around the world. And this can be used for oxygation. These two accessories can be used for oxygation. So when a farmer is using oxygation, he should also be a little careful. So in the control head, when we are adding air through the venturi, what will happen is when it goes to the field, for each submain, we will have, in the submain itself, we will have one air valve that is known to all of us. So what will happen is all the air we are adding to the irrigation water, that would get separated through the air valve and it would get released. So that should be prevented. So in order to prevent air from getting released away, what we should do is we should have the air valves in the flush line. This is the submain. At the end of the submain, in the subsurface drip irrigation, we will have a flush line, that is a PVC pipeline that will be installed. So we have to have our air valves in the flush line only, not in the submain. If you have air valves in the flush line, what will happen is the air that is in the irrigation water would get released at this point after passing through the drippers. So that should be kept in mind. And nowadays, due to the reduction in prices in plastics and all, people are using in greenhouses and things like that. For every lateral also, one can use one venturi, or for see in this figure, for 2 laterals, one venturi is kept, and when water passes through this venturi, air will be sucked inside, and air will pass through the pass into the irrigation water, and oxygenation is done. And people have found that if we maintain a pressure head loss or pressure head difference between inlet and outlet of the venturi around 5 meters, 0.5 KSE between inlet and outlet, it adds up around 12% of the 12% air by volume of water. So this has been found to be sufficient to get a significant increase in yield. Chemical methods can also be used for oxidation. The chemical recommended for doing oxidation is mixing a chemical called hydrogen peroxide with irrigation water. When we mix hydrogen peroxide in irrigation water, the oxygen, dissolved oxygen in the irrigation water gets improved. And the hydrogen peroxide nowadays is also a recommended chemical for removal of algae from drippers and pipes. We all know that when we take water from surface sources like open wells and all, we will have a lot of clogging problem. So, so far we have been recommending for removal of algae the sodium hypochlorite and calcium hypochlorite, that is bleaching powder, was recommended. Nowadays, for removal of the algae, instead of bleaching powder, hydrogen peroxide is very much recommended, because it doesn't cause the environmental problems. Those are caused by the bleaching powder and chemicals like that. So when we are using hydrogen peroxide, we can be sure of two purposes. One is clogging removal, and also another purpose of oxygen availability. So the dosage recommended for hydrogen peroxide mixing with irrigation water is 1 milliliter per liter of water. The next technology I will talk about now is partial root zone drying. What did scientists இது கொஞ்சம் ஈஸியா இருக்கு, இது இப்படி ஈஸியா இருக்கு, உட்கார்றதுக்கு ஈஸியா இருக்கு, பின்னாடி இல்ல இருக்கட்டும், கரெக்டா இருக்குது, ஒன்றும் பிரச்சனை இல்லை. இது எனக்கு sorry for the interruption. In case of grapevines, scientists conducted an experiment with grapevine. What scientists did is they divided the root zone into 2 parts. They grew the root zone into two parts, and irrigation was done in one part alone, and the other part remained dry. So the irrigation would be done in this case for few weeks, maybe 1 week or 2 weeks or 3 weeks, only on one side. On the other side, it will be dry. Then irrigation will be abruptly switched to the other side, and irrigation will be kept, will be done only on this side, and this side will become dry. Like that, switching between sides for alternating the irrigation has been done by the scientists, and people have found, the scientists have found tremendous advantages of doing this kind of irrigation, and this method is called partial root zone drying. So for doing partial root zone drying type of irrigation, what should be done is, we actually normally we install for one crop row we install one lateral, but if one wants to do partial root zone drying, one has to install for one crop row, 2 laterals have to be installed. Only then we will be able to do partial root zone drying. So when one side is being irrigated and this will be not irrigated for few weeks, and after few weeks this side will be irrigated and this side will be dried. So in that fashion the irrigation can be done. So by doing partial root zone drying, what are all the benefits we get? So we are able to train the plant to manage stress during drought conditions. It reduces the stomatal conductance. So the stomatal opening, when it gets reduced, transpiration gets reduced. And also because of doing this kind of alternating, switching between sites for irrigation, the nitrogen and phosphorus availability in the root zone gets improved. When nitrogen and phosphorus availability in the root zone gets improved, its uptake also gets improved. So tremendous advantages have been proved by the scientists, and for almost all crops research is being done, and I am presenting one research result for you to understand. And for banana crop, when 1 week was used for switching interval between sites, scientists found that they could save 50% of water, and there was yield reduction of only 8%. There was yield reduction, but it should be kept in mind that when we use partial root zone drying, then there will be a slightly yield reduction, but saving in water will be very high. So these kind of methodologies can be recommended during or in the places where water is scarce. The fourth technology we will talk now is low pressure drip irrigation. So obviously low pressure drip irrigation means it will operate with a very low pressure. So from the image you will be able to see that from the tanks itself we will be able to do drip irrigation. The tanks which are placed just at the height of only 1 meter from the ground can be very well used in low pressure drip irrigation. The low pressure drip irrigation can also be used without tanks also by directly connecting the pump, but with operating with very low pressure. You should also keep in your mind that 1 meter of water column is very low pressure, but normal drip irrigation systems that we are now adopting and now we are recommending to be used uses 10 meters of water column. 10 meters of water column means it is equal to what you say 1 kg pressure. 1 kg pressure, what you say, is equivalent to 10 meters of water column. Even 1/10 of 1 kg of pressure is sufficient in low pressure drip irrigation system. So when one uses a low pressure drip irrigation system, the strength of the pipes, those are used, equipments, all these things are the thickness of the pipe. All these things are very less thick, so the cost is very less. So power also, since low pressure is added to the water, power consumed is also less, so operating cost is less. But it should be kept in mind that these kind of low pressure drip irrigation systems are applicable only for the level fields. Only in level fields, if you find the repair discharge rates at different locations, you will find that there will not be much variation. there will not be much variation in drip or discharge rates. If low pressure drip irrigation systems are laid in undulating fields, you will find that the drip or discharge rates will be significantly varying, and it should not be recommended for undulating lands. And nowadays, the solar systems are very much used. So integration with low pressure drip irrigation system with solar systems are happening. That can be recommended. Low pressure drip irrigation system with the solar systems can be very much recommended. And already I said, in undulating lands, it should not be used. And one more problem with low pressure drip irrigation is clogging, because the water comes out with a very, very low pressure, low velocity. Filtration has to be done carefully. If filtration is not done properly, then clogging could be a problem. Wherever possible, larger discharge rate dripper should be used. If you have 2 liter per hour dripper and also 4 liter per hour dripper, always go for higher rate dripper discharge rate, because higher discharge rate dripper will have a larger flow passage. So clogging will not be any problem in that case. And even 4 liter per hour dripper, if you are using, you will be getting only 1.25 liters per hour at 1 meter pressure head. Whenever we say 4 liter per hour, it means that this dripper will deliver 4 liters only. 10 meter pressure head is available at the dripper, or otherwise you will get less only. So in case of low pressure drip irrigation system, even if you are using 4 liter per hour dripper discharge rate, you will get only very less discharge, but you can increase the irrigation time in order to have sufficient irrigation. And fifth is the most interesting cell phone app, crop demand estimation using cell phone. So this is a very popular and simple formula for estimating evapotranspiration of any crop. Any crop is equal to Kc. It is a crop factor into ETO. ETO means reference crop evapotranspiration. So if we know these two factors, we will be able to find out what is the evapotranspiration of the crop. So if we estimate the evapotranspiration, and we will be able to irrigate that much. So in order to find the reference crop evapotranspiration, it is a standard synthetic grass, for which we need evapotranspiration. For finding a reference crop evapotranspiration in foreign countries and all, farmers own meteorology station, then they will measure wind speed, humidity, temperature, and all these things, and based on that they will calculate the evapotranspiration. But our farmers did not make use of this kind of method, and since it was not affordable and easy. Nowadays, the remote sensing technology has improved to such an extent that you don't need to have a meteorological station in your in farmers field. If you just download a app that is provided by Netafim, you just put in your Google, type Netafim app for crop demand estimation, you will get this app, and it can be downloaded, and from the app for your area, wherever you are in any part of the world, for that place, what is the reference crop evapotranspiration that occurred for the previous day can be found out. And not only that, you will get reference crop evapotranspiration forecasted for 1 week ahead, and also you will get a reference crop evapotranspiration that occurred for the past week also. So using this data, how one can do irrigation? Let us assume that for any crop, for instance, irrigation interval is 3 days. So you have to give 3 days irrigation requirement. So you have to first find out ETO for past 3 days from this app. From this app, we find out ETO for past 3 days. Let us say for the past day it is 3. And a day before yesterday it is 7, and 2 days before yesterday is 1, Add all the ETO, add all the ETO, and you get 11 mm. So this 11 mm, this 11 mm has to be substituted here. And Kc is the crop factor. It depends on crop, and it also depends on the stage of the crop. This factor is easily available, downloaded easily from the internet resources. It is very easy. Then it can be used here, and multiply, you get evapotranspiration of the crop. So let us assume that Kc is 1, then you will have 11 mm itself. So for your crop, what you have to do is you have to apply 11 mm of irrigation. So you will be very accurately be irrigating if you are using this app. And this app has found place, and people are using this app around the world very well. Even in Tamil Nadu and all, many people are already using it. So this can be popularized among the farmers in order to improve optimal irrigation. We should also know what is the minimum irrigation duration for row crops in drip irrigation. So in case of row crops, we adopt inline laterals. So when inline laterals are used, when a dripper is operated, the wetted circles would get formed like this. These wetted circles have to join together, and until that time irrigation should be done. We should get a continuous wetted strip, something like this. Only then irrigation should be stopped. This is called minimum irrigation duration. When one lateral is used for 2 laterals, what should be done is irrigation should be sufficiently done to wet until the 2 rows of the crops. Sometimes we also use for single lateral, we use 4 crop rows, even 4, 5 also. So the minimum irrigation time should be such that the entire width gets wetted. So this is a easy job to know how minimum irrigation duration should be found. But the maximum duration of irrigation is very important, and that should be known by the farmer. So for finding maximum duration of irrigation, a farmer has to do a little field work. What one should do is, he should dig a small pit at the end of any lateral. At any place in the field, at the end of any lateral, a small pit should be dug. And if you look at here, the dripper from the wall of the pit, from this wall of the pit, it should be half the spacing as that of the normal spacing. Let us assume that the normal spacing between the drippers is 40 centimeter, half spacing is 20 centimeter. The dripper should be placed at 20 centimeter from the wall, and it should be operated. And you should find out the time taken for the wetting front to reach the maximum rooting depth. So that is the time until which you can do the maximum irrigation. If you are irrigating time beyond that time, you will be irrigating below the crop root zone. When you are irrigating below the crop root zone, not only you will be wasting the water, you will also be sending all your nutrients that you are adding with the irrigation water would get leached away, and you will not be able to get the full benefit of using drip irrigation. So this is one of the important things that is not being followed by our farmers, and it should be understood, and it should be popularized among farmers. It doesn't take much time for any farmer to dig a small pit and to know how the wetted front behaves. Next we see drip irrigation for coconut. Scientists have found that for coconut, most active root zone, most active roots which take water is at the 1 to 1.5 meters, is at 1 to 1.5 meters from the trunk of the plant. So if we are able to make a trench something like this and have our drippers placed or discharging water only in the trench, then we will be using the water optimally, efficiently well. Even if you are using tap, some people, for some farmers use tap. Even farmers use tap can allow the water to get stagnated only in this trench. Then they will not be wasting too much of water, and in this trench they can also place coir pit and organic mulches and things like that, and optimally manage the water for coconut. Finally, I will introduce the technologies. Those are popularly used under automation of irrigation systems. What is automation of irrigation systems? It is operation of irrigation with minimum manual intervention. With minimum manual intervention, we can do irrigation nowadays. We can automate valves, we can automate pumps on and off can be done, fertigation can be done, filter washing can be automatically done. All these are possible with the improvement in electronics and computer technology. Nowadays, with advanced automated fertigation systems, we find many channels, many tanks in which for nitrogen a separate tank, for phosphorus separate tank, for potash separate tank, and micronutrients can be placed in separate tank. Around 5 tanks can be placed, and the automated instrument will be able to take fertilizer solution precisely measured quantities, and it will get injected into the irrigation water. During that process, the electrical conductivity and pH can also be maintained by mixing with the acid. The pH can be maintained to a level around 5.5 and all will be optimal. And these kind of systems are very much used nowadays in greenhouses. Filter backwashing, already I said, can be done with this kind of systems. All these automation are done by a single controller, and this controller gets interfaced with a computer, and the computer can it can also be interfaced with your cell phone. So since it can be interfaced with the cell phone, all this automation can be monitored, and commands also can be given from the cell phone. So those kind of developments have occurred. If you look at the irrigation valves in automation systems, irrigation valves will be in the field. So all the controller and control head will be too far. If you want to control the irrigation valves at the field, we have to connect with wires, and it is very difficult and it is a tedious process. Nowadays, for this also technology has grown, and remote controlled valves from the control head has come. There will be a remote terminal unit, and that remote terminal unit will be powered by solar system itself. This is a remote controller, and this remote controller gets its instruction through radio waves from the controller. Here we have a radio wave receiver and all. So these kind of systems also have come. So these are all the most advanced systems. Those are available in the market now. So now I will introduce about in automation few components, so that when you look at in the field, when people talk with you regarding automation, you will be able to understand what the technical person is talking about. All automation equipment will have a relay circuit. 20 minutes. 10 to 15 minutes. For 15 minutes. All automation systems will have a simple relay circuit. So in this, if you see, this is called the main circuit. In this main circuit, you see there is a AC motor, and this motor is connected with a power, and this part is called relay. So this relay has a switching mechanism, and when this switch is put on, this AC motor will run. And you see here, this is called relay circuit, and this relay circuit is also connected in this relay. This relay is one part, and in this relay you are able to see one power source. Power source can be DC or AC. If DC is used, 12 volt DC will be normally used. If AC is used, 25 volt AC will be used using a transformer. And you should keep in your mind that this relay circuit works with low voltage. It will not cause any kind of electric shock at all. So in this relay circuit, you find a switching mechanism here. And if the power is switched on, it will pass through a electric coil wound over a soft iron core. When electric current passes through the soft iron core, what happens is this gets magnetized. When it gets magnetized, this switch is attracted towards it, and there will be a contact, and electric current will pass through. So as long as electric current passes through in this coil, then this switch will be put on. When current does not pass through this, then switch will be opened. So how long the current can be made to pass through the relay circuit can be decided by connecting a timer here or a sensor here. If you have let us assume that you have a timer here. In the timer, you look at the control panel of a timer. In the timer, you can set up when the irrigation should start and how long irrigation should last. So if you are programming that, it's not a very big programming, just you set up with your cell phone, like cell phone, you can fix up timing. And if you leave it, then it will take care of all things automatically. Similarly, you can have, instead of a timer, one can also have soil moisture sensors at this place. So any automation system will have these kind of components. Main circuit will be operated by the relay circuits, and relay circuits will have a low potential current, and one doesn't need to worry about electric shock and all. So since it is operated by human being, it should not have a higher potential so that it does not cause any electric shock to the user. So one of the very big disadvantage with that electromechanical relay is that it has to move. Wherever there is a movement like this, there will be wear and tear, and also since high voltage current is passing through this circuit, when putting on and off electric arc will get produced. Electric arc means high temperature. Because of high temperature, the contacts will get oxidized and all, it will go off within short time. So people have developed nowadays solid state relay. Instead of electromechanical relay, solid state relays are used. Solid state relay, you see here four terminals, here 2 and here 2, here also 4. This can be placed here. The solid state relay are made of electronic materials, semiconductor materials, and there will not be any moving part inside, but it will do the same process as that of this electromechanical relay. And in many places, solid state relays will be used. And in automation, this valve, solenoid valve, is a component everywhere you will hear. Solenoid valve principle is very much similar to electromechanical relay. You look here, this is the solenoid part. The solenoid part has a a coil winding. This yellow part is the coil winding. When it is when coil winding is given power, then it will get magnetized. When it gets magnetized, it will attract this plunger upwards, and the plunger is spring loaded. When it is spring loaded, it closes the gate. It closes the gate of the pipe. So when it is in closed position, water will not be able to pass through the pipe. When we give electricity to the coil winding, when it gets plunger gets attracted upwards, the valve will get opened up and water will be able to pass through. So this is the basic operations in solenoid valve. When we have the solenoid valve directly fitted with the pipeline, then that is called directly operated solenoid valve. Directly operated solenoid valves are used for smaller diameter pipes. In irrigation, this is one controller for one directly operated solenoid valve. This controller will control only one solenoid valve, and how to operate the solenoid valve can be easily programmed. Something like on which and which day the irrigation should be done, for how long the irrigation should be done. For instance, on Monday and Thursday, 8 a.m. to 10 a.m. irrigation must be done. If you program like that, it will do it for you. But in this system, whether water goes through the pipe or not, it doesn't care. On Monday and Thursday, 8 a.m. to 10 a.m., it will be opened. It doesn't care whether water goes through the pipe or not. So in that way, these controllers work. And as far as irrigation is concerned, in farmer fields, not directly operated solenoid valves are very much used. Only pilot operated solenoid valves are used. This is a pilot operated solenoid valves for large diameter pipes. In this case, this is the pipe. This is the solenoid. Solenoid is not directly connected in the pipe. Solenoid is connected in a bypass. See here, you also have a diaphragm. You have a diaphragm valve here. This is the diaphragm part. In this diaphragm part, there is a narrow passage through which water can go in, and there is a spring, and it is spring loaded. And when the valve is in closed position, the water goes through this and it occupies all this position, including solenoid. When the solenoid is opened, water will come down to the downstream side. It gets filled up in all these places. You see here, in all these places, it gets filled up. And the valve has been designed in such a way that when it is opened, the force from the downside, will be more than the force from the upper side, and because of that, the diaphragm gets lifted up and water goes up and passes through this way. So it will be the main direction of the flow. So in order to operate these kind of valves, we need minimum pressure. Some pressure has to be there. Only then these valves will be opened, because only then it will be able to lift the diaphragm. So these valves, if you look in the field, many people would have used. They are called pilot operated solenoid valves. And one more thing, this is an automatic metering valve, also can be seen in the field. This valve has a water meter. This does not, for operation of this valve, one does not need any electric power at all. It has a very big water meter. Along with that, a diaphragm valve is placed here. The water meter, in the water meter, you have to set the flow. Say 5 meter cube flow. If you are setting 5 meter cube of flow, after water meter, after water passes, 5 meter cube of water passes through the water meter, it will send an impulse to the diaphragm valve, and the diaphragm valve will get closed. The functioning of the diaphragm valve and all is much similar to this valve only, but this does not need any electric power at all. So these kinds of automatic valves are standalone valves. They will operate only one valve at a time. So if we use overhead tanks, and if you operate these single valves with this kind of methodology, there will not be any problem. Even if all valves are closed, there will not be any pressure increase and pipe bursting and all will not happen. But in real situations, pumps exist in water line. So if all the valves are closed, there will be possibility of bursting of pipes. So we need to go for higher technology level, and nowadays intelligent controllers are used. When one valve is when all valves are closed, it will check up. If all valves are closed, it will automatically close the motor power supply also. When one valve is opened, during that time, if the motor is not started also, then also problem. So when a valve is opened, it will also check up whether motor is running or not. If the motor is not running, it will also open up the motor. So in case of automation, one more thing, pressure relief valves are also very much used. Sometimes if pressure goes beyond limit, the pressure relief valves will automatically open up and relieve the pressure, and they will have a quick response and things like that. These kind of valves are also used. And we will see pressure management valves. There are two valves, pressure reducing valve and pressure sustaining valves. The pressure reducing valves will maintain a downstream pressure, whatever be the upstream condition. For a design pressure, let us say 1 kSc or 2 kSc, if you want, you don't need to operate every time this valve and look for, you don't need to adjust to get a design pressure. If you install this valve, this will automatically maintain a downstream pressure. That valve also does not need any electric power or electric controller and things like that. There is another valve called pressure sustaining valve. Pressure sustaining valve will maintain upstream pressure. Whatever be the downstream pressure, it does not look into the downstream at all. It will look at only upstream and the upstream pressure. The pressure reducing valves are very much used in hilly areas where pressure increase is too high, and pressure sustaining valves are used where the bypass valves are used. All of you know that when in a normal drip irrigation system, when pressure is very high, we have to divert some amount of water to well itself in order to decrease the pressure, so that a constant pressure is maintained. So farmer has to maintain a constant pressure by operating the valve manually. Instead of that, if we install a pressure sustaining valve at this place, and if we set the pressure, then automatically always in the system a certain pressure, design pressure, will be maintained. These are all very costly valves, costing around 10,000 to 20,000. And this is pressure management valve. Both will look like same. Pressure reducing valve and pressure sustaining valves will appear same, but operation will be different. It will have two knobs. If you adjust these two knobs for your situation, and if you fit it, you can forget it, and it will keep on working for designed pressure to be maintained either in upstream or in downstream. Already I said automatic backwashing in filters is made possible by having a separate controller. The separate controller will be able to manage the solenoid valves, and here we can program for each flushing how much time flushing operation should be done. Next flushing should be done at what time interval, and all this kind of standalone controllers are also available in the market. And lastly, soil moisture sensors are also used for automation. 4 soil moisture sensors are used normally. One is tensiometer and resistivity sensor, and the third is capacitance and time domain reflectometry sensors. The tensiometer sensor and resistivity sensors are very much used. because of the low cost. Capacitance and time domain reflectometry sensors are also used. They are very good, accurate, but since they are costly, mostly farmers do not use it, but they can be used. But at present, only in research, these sensors are used. In tensiometer and resistivity, you get data regarding soil moisture tension. The soil moisture tension is if that kind of data is available for the farmer, it is very advantageous, in the sense the farmer does not need to see in what kind of soil the crop has been grown. If let us say for sugarcane, the optimal soil moisture tension data is for 500 centimeter of soil moisture tension, irrigation should be done. Whether the crop is grown in sand or loam or clay, doesn't matter. When 500 centimeter of soil moisture tension comes, irrigation can be done. So that is the biggest advantage of soil moisture tension kind of research data. So முடிச்சிட்டீங்களா சார்? இன்னொரு 5 minutes போட்டுமா? இன்னொரு 5 minutes போலாமா? இல்ல இன்னொரு 4-5 slides இருக்கு. 4-5 முடிச்சிட்டு. ஓகே. The characteristics of resistivity sensors is there is a in resistivity sensors the resistance between electrodes is measured. So the resistivity and soil moisture tension is resistivity and soil moisture tension are proportional. So if you measure resistivity, you will be able to estimate soil moisture. So one of few disadvantages with resistivity sensor is that if the contact area between soil and the sensor vary, then resistance will also vary, then resistivity will also vary. And there are possibilities of air pockets getting formed between electrodes and soil, that will also affect the observations. And also in saline soils and in fertigation, when we do fertigation and all, the ionic atmosphere in the soil will affect the resistivity. So that will also affect the observations. So these are all some of the disadvantages of the resistance sensor. So people developed another sensor called gypsum block resistivity sensor. So with gypsum block resistivity sensor, what is done is the electrodes are placed in a gypsum block, and the gypsum block has a very good buffering capacity. So because of the buffering capacity, the effect of salinity is reduced. So in saline soils, the resistivity sensors will have a lot of errors, but if you use gypsum block resistivity sensors, of salinity and errors due to salinity get reduced. But one small problem is that the gypsum will get eroded, dissipated, and maybe for 3, 4, 5 years it has to be replaced. So these are all the few sensors. This is that with the tensiometer, one valve can be controlled, and with the tensiometer, with the 2 tensiometers also we can do irrigation. How that is done is with when one tensiometer will be placed in the effective root zone. So when soil moisture tension goes below a level, and that level can be adjusted with a knob here. We can fix up at what soil moisture tension irrigation should be started. So when irrigation is started, we should also know when it should be stopped. So that is taken care by this tensiometer. So when water goes to this, when this area gets wetted, sufficiently wet, then this tensiometer will send signal to the controller to stop this valve. So these are all some of the advancements. Those are happening around the world. So with that, I conclude my lecture. Hope I have given sufficient information on this subject, and I expect feedback and any questions from the trainees and participants. Thank you.